And let me emphasize that that money is not just focused on the flagship UT Austin. It is focused throughout the region that we serve, which is all of Texas, with many of our campuses being along the Texas-Mexico border. UT Brownsville, UT Pan Am, UTSA, UTEP. Imagine how transformative this can be. So then, without these experiences, I would not have had the choices so beautifully described by Robert Frost as two diverging roads, which for me came as a decision whether to practice medicine exclusively as a pediatric and as a transplant surgeon, or to lead an academic health center as its president, and then the University of Texas system as chancellor. Tony knows very well, he was one of the very first individuals in October of 2008, I guess it was maybe the summer of 2008, that I called Tony. Tony has always been a great counselor to me. And I told him, you know, Tony, I met all my objectives as president of the Health Science Center. I've fixed the practice plan. I've enhanced philanthropy. I've really changed the culture of this university. I believe it's time for me to go back to something I love to do every day, which is pediatric and transplant surgery, because I continue to take call every other weekend. Tony said, you know, Francisco, that's a great decision. You've accomplished your goals. It's time to set a new horizon. Little did I know, in fact, I announced in public that I was going back to surgery. Again, it was completely unexpected that the Board of Regents would ask me to again consider leading the University of Texas system. You know, a very competitive process. I had to interview, I had to compete, but they wanted me not to close that door. So again, another road. Should I do this, or should I go back to pediatric surgery? I brought it down to its element. The element was, I came to the conclusion that higher education saves lives. Think about it. Literacy improves public health. It improves the economic vibrancy of this nation. It improves the national security, not only of this nation, but the world. And if I could do a part of enhancing the University of Texas system's success, then I felt I wasn't far from the Hippocratic Oath, you know, of improving the quality of life for others, and thus I made the conclusion to go ahead and interview. Well, as Sandra Day O'Connor, the former U.S. Supreme Court Justice, so beautifully expressed, in order to cultivate a set of leaders with legitimacy in the eyes of the citizenry, it is necessary that the path to leadership be visibly open to talented and to qualified individuals of every race and ethnicity. All members of our heterogeneous society must have confidence in the openness and in the integrity of our educational institutions that provide this training. So let us ensure that incredible choices and junctures are open for future generations through the choices that we are making in public service. These choices have to do with which students we are reaching out to, which federal and state policies we may choose to become involved with, and ways to buttress our educational system in whatever manner we can in order to achieve a diverse, talented student pool from elementary school all the way to graduate education. I may add that people prosper or fail, careers are developed or lost, depending on what we choose to do, which path we choose to take. So we cannot any longer risk complacency as we face a looming storm that is nothing short of a public health crisis if we don't fix it. So we must ensure, in closing, that the student pipeline remains wonderfully competitive, diverse, open, and bountiful, that we ensure that our little children from kindergarten through college pursue knowledge through a deep love of learning, which can cross disciplines in creativity and flashes of brilliance, and that we must ensure that our educational institutions become conduits to serving the greater good. This moment in history demands such a collective effort in the spirit of what is best for our country, for our society, and for this world. So let us choose to seize the moment and follow inspired decisions to their realization. Many of the goals and principles that the Latino Leadership Network embraces. So my belief is that this will make a world of difference for the next generation and generations to come. Mickey, thank you very much for allowing me to express a little bit about my background, my passion for education, and the role that the University of Texas plays in making our nation more vibrant, more prosperous in this world, a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cigarroa. I'd like to invite Tony Sanchez and Congressman Hinojosa just to come up on the stage for a moment to present our Nambe Eagle Leadership Award. Dr. Cigarroa, the Nambe Award is reserved as a presentation, as a testament, as a marker of outstanding leadership and contribution to our community. So on behalf of the Latino Leaders Network, I'm proud to present the Nambe Eagle Leadership Award. Absolutely. Just a couple of points that I want to close with. Sponsor material and partner publications are available outside the ballroom. Please take what interests you. As Michelle mentioned, we hope to see all of you again at our very next luncheon, which will be September 22nd, where we will welcome CNN anchor Soledad O'Brien. And finally, again, thanks to the Coca-Cola Company, to Verizon, and Anheuser-Busch for making all of this possible today. And most importantly, to Dr. Cigarroa, our honored guest, and all of you, our guests, thank you so much for spending time with us once again. Goodbye.
Right. I have to.
And if we do it in English,
Okay, everybody, we're
we have
getting
to translate.
started. Okay.
Okay, let's start with something extremely broad and extremely big and large, so you can answer quickly and short. And it's about the word reform nowadays is attached to three major issues in this country. One is education, and you as a professor know about that as an educator. The other one, obviously, is immigration, and I ask you about that as a Hispanic in this country. And the other one is health, and I ask you that as, obviously, as a doctor, as an important doctor in this country too. So what are these three issues with the word reform attached mean to you?
Well, opportunity, innovation, and healthy debate, which, is really part of, many of the principles of American life. And as an educator, really universities need to be, at the front and center of, listening to both sides of the arguments on any of those three major issues that you've spoken about. And that's the beauty about being, within the University of Texas system, is that you really have, wonderful exchange of ideas coming from various viewpoints, which hopefully will allow, policymakers to make the best decisions, for the public good.
But when we talk about something so controversial in this country like health reform and coverage for the data, the raw data is there and it's extremely dramatic in terms of people without coverage, people are struggling for having access to health care. How do you live that?
Well, again, it's unacceptable, for over 45 million people in the United States to lack, basic insurance coverage. And so, the balance is how we can, really confront healthcare reform. The current model is not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, how can you protect, the important relationship between healthcare provider and patient and choice,
Mm-hmm.
Which has also been a part, of American life. And then, the third aspect is, if the proposed costs are close to anywhere from 1 to 1.6 trillion,
Mm-hmm.
what is the best way of approaching that over the next 10 years? And, That's why we're kind of in the epicenter of this debate right now. But again, leading a system with 6 health institutions, we can certainly play a very important role in hopefully providing better deliveries of healthcare, which are, again, much more cost effective and at the same time, result in better patient outcomes. Again, the importance of, electronic health records, where, one of the problems that, I've seen as a physician for many of our underinsured or uninsured patients is that they don't have a medical home. They often visit, emergency room to emergency room, and at the same time, a medical health record doesn't follow them. And so just imagine, trying to, result in an efficient healthcare plan, for that one patient, to try to individualize healthcare for that patient. It becomes close to impossible unless we can solve the problem of, being able to exchange, medical information in a confidential and in an effective way.
I think family doctors, which is an old-fashioned thing,
It's not old-fashioned. It still exists.
It still exists, but it's...
My father has been, practicing medicine for over 50 years and is still making house calls.
Right. And do you think that trying to recover that concept can be one of the keys?
I think it's going to be, again, it's pretty hard for anything to result in an immediate, this will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. Probably a provider who's been practicing medicine for 50 years in solo practice may find it difficult to suddenly transform, into a, electronic health record system. But again, the importance of our medical schools in being able to work with communities, with group practices, and eventually individual physicians in helping implement, part of American healthcare reform. But this is going to take some time, in my opinion. But again, is it important to move forward, with this debate, with substantive reform, and at the same time protecting that fundamental relationship between a physician and a patient? My answer is yes.
Talk to me as a Hispanic in this country. We receive so many great compliments for being the next thing when, from a point of view, we have always been the thing as part of the American fabric. But lately, we are being sold as the next thing because the demographics, the numbers are there. How have you lived your life as a Hispanic in this country? And I suppose that has a lot to do with your life on the border, as a border town native.
Well, my heritage has been a part of every attribute that I've brought together in my life. I grew up in Laredo, right on the border between Texas and Mexico. My paternal grandfather actually fled the Mexican Revolution and ended up in San Antonio, where he began his medical practice. During the Depression, moved to Laredo, which is, again, where I was born and raised. They taught us 3 principles. First, love and respect for each other. Second, the importance of education in one's life and to be a lifelong learner. Third is a passion to give back to the community. And also growing up in that environment where, we shadowed my father, who's still a physician, seeing how medically underserved that region, of Texas was, to accompany father on house calls for those patients who did not have access to clinics or to hospitals because they didn't have any transportation. To travel with my uncle, who was a general surgeon, to small cities surrounding Laredo that did not have a general surgeon. Again, really opened up your eyes about how important education is, how important as a physician one has to be accessible, affordable, and still be excellent in the way you take care of your patients. And then also, really, learning the best of both worlds, which is, the culture that I inherited and the language that I inherited, from Mexico. And then also, the wonderful culture of, being an American citizen. So, again, being on the border, I really got the best of both worlds. I would spend every holiday, every summer vacation with my grandfather, who was a rancher in Mexico. And in the summers, I would in Tamaulipas, and the ranch was on the border between Tamaulipas and Coahuila. But that's where I also learned, the love of the land. In fact, I thought I was going to be a rancher at some point in my life, but my abuelito said, I think you'll be better off as a physician. But anyhow, you can get the sense of that I've really lived both worlds. And it really has served me well, not only as a student in college, but as a physician, and also as a administrator of both the Health Science Center and now the University of Texas system. So in regards to students being exposed to kind of a global world, I was exposed to that on my first day of life.
So lastly, I know you come from a family of 8 brothers and sisters?
10.
10. Wow.
Mother was going to have 12, and my grandfather said he would buy her a limousine, and after 10 she said, you can have the limousine.
Okay, okay let's talk about how that shaped you also. We have talked about the Hispanic factor, the doctor's factor. Let's talk about the family factor, living in that extensive family. And I have read, under the influence of an extremely disciplinarian mother, is that true?
Yeah, I still have some bruises. No, she is a very loving mother, but imagine raising 5 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. She had to be tough. But really, again, my reflections of my family go back to my grandparents. My grandmother, abuelita, her name was Josefina. Every Sunday, the families would get together for a comida. And my abuelita would gather all her grandchildren around the table and give us $1. And then she'd ask us to return the $1 to her and say that this $1 is going to go, into, a checking account for your college education. And so, we were 5 or 6. We were hoping to buy bubble gum, but, we never saw the $1 for that. And actually, she kept her word. When we graduated from high school, she said, here's your savings, to pay for college. And so, the joy of my family, for their children was, really this installation of a love of learning. All 10 of us graduated from college, and all 10 of us, received a professional education. And many of us are, still in university life, giving back to the community through being faculty at universities. And, several brothers went back to Laredo to join my father's practice in medicine. But the beautiful thing about this circle of life is that the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, each one of them has also, each one of them graduated from high school, are going to college, and are trying to be the best they can to improve the quality of life in this world.